Thank you for making us so proud. This is exactly where we want to be right now. I love you too. I love you too, and I feel it from you. I got to tell you, it also makes me proud to listen to former Mayor Lozano, who is absolutely correct. You know, never asked a single constituent, whether they were a Republican or a Democrat, who they loved, to whom they prayed, how many generations they could count themselves a Texan, whether they came here last week. Always wanted to make sure that he delivered for the people who put him into that position of public trust. Always reached out to me. And if I could help, I always did. Sometimes just reached out to say, hey, Beto, how are you feeling? Heard that you weren't doing so well lately. Want to make sure that you're okay. His beautiful, amazing mother had us over to their house to have this gourmet dish that you all call Solace Burgers at their house, at their dining room table. I mean, that's the kind of hospitality that you all demonstrate here. To listen to Susan Hayes, her fierce advocacy on the part of people, especially in rural Texas, who for far too long have been taken for granted by this governor and this agricultural commissioner, who just thinks because if you live in rural Texas, you're red, you're Republican, they've got you in the bank, they don't have to show up or listen to you, learn from you, understand, or deliver to you. She's here to fight for you and to earn your vote. And I'll tell you what, put her in that position of public trust as agricultural commissioner, set her loose, and watch what she does for Valverde County and for every county across the state of Texas. We would be so lucky to have her. So please make sure that we vote for her on the ballot. And listen, sometimes I'm tempted when we're talking about Attorney General to say, look, wouldn't it be so nice if we had an Attorney General who wasn't indicted not once but twice, who wasn't under active FBI investigation, who didn't lead the Stop the Steal March on the 6th of January 2021, who did not, from the state of Texas, using our tax dollars, sue other states across the country, November 2020, to overturn a lawfully, legitimately decided election. I mean, yes, it would be nice if we didn't have that guy, but even if we had someone else, having Rochelle Garza up against anyone in the world, not only is she a proud fronteriza, not only is she a brand new mom, but tell me there is a more fierce fighter on the planet today to stand up for the women of this state who are under attack unlike any women anywhere else in the United States of America today. Let's get behind Rochelle Garza and make sure she's our next Attorney General. And we're going to hear from our current mayor in just a moment. But let me say this. Listening to Chris has got to fill you with pride. For every classroom teacher, every school counselor, and I listen to you counselors, and you tell me you're up 500 to 1, 800 to 1, 1,000 to 1 in some school districts. You're supposed to take care of 1,000 kids because somehow in the 9th largest economy on the planet, we have yet to come up with the resources to hire more counselors to help you to connect with more kids, to make sure that more of them can get through life right now after 2 years of pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, 2 years where some of them have lost a grandparent to COVID, or their folks lost their jobs, or their family lost their home, or that kid who's on free and reduced breakfast and lunch doesn't have a meal to go home to at the end of the day, is wearing the same dirty pair of jeans, probably the same dirty chones, day in and day out, because their folks do not have the extra cash to pay that forward. And very often it's that classroom teacher, that counselor, that librarian, who out of their own pocket pays for that third meal at the end of the day, pays for that new set of clothes so that kid can learn with pride, hold his head up high, just like every other kid in that classroom. These educators who are sacrificing for us the best years of their lives, who are taking on 2, sometimes 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. I cannot tell you how many times I've been at a world-class establishment like Doc Holliday's, drinking a cold beer, when the server on the other end of the bar says, you know what, Beto, I'm one of those teachers you talked about. I serve at this bar for the pleasure of taking care of kids in this kindergarten classroom Monday through Friday. I don't do it for spending cash. I don't do it for some extra income. I do it to pay the note on the mortgage, to put food in front of my kids. I do this just to survive. And on top of that, my governor pours indignity after indignity upon my head and into my classroom. He wants me to find the trans kid in my class and turn in their parents for child abuse and refer them over to CPS, which is running the worst foster care program in America, bar none. 32,000 kids in our custody and care. Some of them, too many of them tonight, will be sleeping in CPS offices, in the hallways, under the desks, atop the tables. Believe it or not, and you can look this up if you doubt me, 100 of them have died in our custody and care just in the last year and a half. Hundreds more have been trafficked for their bodies. Pictures taken of them and sent across the internet. That's in this state right now. And our governor's asking these teachers to turn in the parents of those kids, to refer those children over to CPS. He'll talk about critical race theory and the version of history that you're allowed to teach. He's going to make you take this high stakes, high pressure, standardized test that in no way effectively measures the potential inside of that kid or the effort expended on behalf of that teacher. You know, when we win this, we're going to cancel the STAR test, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. I just want to throw that in to make sure that you know that we can do better. But on top of all that, y además, we ask this teacher to contemplate what he or what she will do when that armed intruder enters that classroom. I know that because so many have approached me. Chemistry teachers who say, you know what, Beto, I feel kind of guilty. Because in my chemistry classroom, we have these big lab tables. And I know that I and my students can hide behind them, and those bullets probably can't penetrate. But that poor social studies teacher, or math teacher, or English teacher, she's not going to be so lucky. Another educator came up to me in San Antonio, and she said, my 14-year-old daughter approached me at the end of this last school year. She said, hey, Mom, when that gunman comes into your room, are you going to sacrifice yourself for those kids as those two teachers in Uvalde did? Or are you going to try to escape so you can come home and take care of us? And through tears, she is telling me this story. She's not sure that she can stay in the job. I do not blame her. We are losing educators in the state of Texas right now by the thousands. My 11-year-old Henry, who just finished 5th grade in June, did not have a permanent classroom teacher any single day of the year at Mesita Elementary. And when I said this to the parents sitting next to me at his 5th grade completion ceremony, they said, you know what? Same for my kid in a completely different class. I say that in Austin, heads are nodding. I say it in Del Rio, heads are nodding. We are seeing a mass exodus of these teachers. And for Chris, despite these pressures and challenges, to willingly go back into that classroom and to know that we are approaching 15 weeks since 19 children were taken from us. And those two teachers who had given the best years of their lives, gave their lives completely to try to protect those kids. And not a thing has changed to better protect him or those kids in front of a governor who could call a special session, who called a special session to go after trans kids, who called a special session to go after CRT, who called a special session after special session after special session to go after our election laws and the right to vote, could not be bothered to call a special election to save the lives of our kids. I'll tell you what, like many of you here, I am a parent. And with my wife, Amy, I'm raising a 15, a 14, and 11-year-old in El Paso. Their eyes are on us now. We face their judgment for what we do or what we fail to do. So I don't know about you, but I'm with Chris. We need change right now. We need to win this election. We need to make sure that we put the lives of our kids ahead of the interests of the NRA or the gun lobby or the current governor or anything else. There's nothing more important. Uvalde deserves justice. Uvalde deserves action. And we today are gathering and committing ourselves to do everything that it takes to deliver for them, to win this election, to make sure Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, that we come together. There's a lot that we're going to argue about. There are many things that we'll disagree on. But our kids, our grandkids, Tell me something that there's more important, that will bring more of us together at this defining moment of truth. You know all you need to know about this election when you know about Uvalde, about a governor who, when he first learns about this, reads the names, or at least the information about, at that time, 14 children killed. He happened to be in Abilene, Texas, the day that slaughter took place. You know what he does? He had a choice. He could come down to Uvalde that night, as those parents were still looking for those buses to drop off their kids, still identifying their children by the shoes that they were wearing, or later that night, the DNA swabs that were taken from them. Or he could go to a fundraiser 300 miles in the opposite direction. Well, you know what he chose to do? He went to that fundraiser. He went there to take checks from campaign contributors instead of being there with the parents, the very people that he serves in this position of power and public trust. He could have been there to comfort them, and he didn't. He shows up the next day, first words out of his mouth, "It could have been worse." I have met those parents, and I'll tell you, to a person, they understand, no, sir, it could not have been worse. And in fact, every single detail that we learn shows us just how bad it was. For more than 70 minutes, on the other side of an unlocked door, you have every manner of law enforcement, including state law enforcement, not lifting a finger, not going through that door, not putting themselves between that shooter and those kids or those teachers, not saving the lives that could have been saved. And we have yet to get answers or any accountability from this governor. He's more interested in covering up. He's more interested in protecting the status quo. He's more interested in making sure that an 18-year-old can buy not one, but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition and use that weapon to shoot those high-velocity, high-impact rounds into the bodies of kids than he is in saving the lives of the most precious people in our lives today. If there's nothing else that you know about the choice before you right now, please know Uvalde. I'll tell you what, were I governor, I would call that special session. I'd bring Democrats and Republicans around the table and I'd say, look, I want to begin with this. I understand that we will not agree on everything. But if we allow perfect to become the enemy of the good, we'll never get anywhere. We'll never protect those other kids who are going to be in the line of fire, I guarantee you, unless we make some change right now. How about this, I'd say? What if, at a minimum, we raise the minimum age of purchase for an AR-15 from 18 years to 21? In the case of Uvalde, that would have purchased us 3 more years. Now, I expect a colleague from across the table to say, Beto, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. Criminals don't follow the law. And I'd concede that. I say, you know what? Criminals don't follow the law. That's what makes them criminals in the first place. But this shooter in Uvalde patiently waited for his 18th birthday. He did not try to break the law and acquire those AR-15s when he was 16, nor when he was 17. The law said you must be 18, so 18 it was. That's when he walked into that gun shop. That's when he bought those weapons. 21 would have purchased us 3 more years for some kind of intervention in Uvalde. And I remind those Republican representatives that the very mayor of Uvalde, we're not on the best of terms, but that guy joined every member of the city council in that community. And they sent a letter to the governor and said, please call a special session and at a minimum, raise the minimum age of purchase. I'd say, look, here's another thing that we could do. What about a red flag law, which says if you already have that firearm, but you're threatening to use it against yourself or against a family member or against somebody in the school, we'll have the power to intervene before it's too late. Well, when you talk to the parents in Uvalde, to that community there, they tell us that this young man was sending off such strong signals that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into Robb Elementary and shot a single soul. Let's give law enforcement the ability to intervene before it's too late. You know, earlier, El Paso was mentioned. I lost 23 of my neighbors. The surviving family members have become very good friends. And we know in El Paso, as we're discovering in Uvalde, this will be with you forever. You'll never lose it. And the best that we can do is do everything we can to make sure that it never happens again to another community. But when that shooter ordered that AK-47 in Allen, Texas, that was used in El Paso, his mom called the police department there. And she said, "Officer, I'm calling because my son just ordered and received an AK-47. I have no idea what he needs with this kind of weapon." And she may also have shared some other signs of distress in that young man's life. You know what the police said? "Good luck. You're on your own. Nothing we can do about it." He drove that AK-47 650 miles to El Paso. He'd been told by Donald Trump that we had an infestation of animals and rapists and criminals who were coming to get us. He may have heard language from Greg Abbott, who sent a letter out that very week saying, "Texans, you must defend yourselves. We must take matters into our own hands." He publishes a manifesto saying, "I'm going to repel this invasion of Hispanics who are taking over the state," walks into that Walmart armed with that AK-47 and slaughters 23 people ultimately in a matter of minutes in a city that loses not even 20 people to murder over the course of an entire year. A red flag law would have allowed the police to respond to that shooter's mom when she called to say something's not right. And here's the last idea that I'd slide across the table if we called that special session as governor. Right now, if you go into a gun store, you have to go through a background check. We're grateful for that. If you have a violent criminal record, that gets picked up. If you have a history of self-harm or harming the people in your lives, we make sure that we don't put a gun in your hand because there's a good chance you'll use it against yourself or you'll use it against your spouse, your girlfriend, or your boyfriend. But in Texas, because we don't have a universal background check, when a person went into a gun shop in Midland in 2019, a month after El Paso, and tried to buy an AR-15 and was refused because he couldn't pass the background check, he went and purchased from a private seller, got the very same weapon, no questions asked, and in Texas, that's legal. Might not be okay, it's not all right by me, but it's legal. He used that firearm to murder 8 people indiscriminately in that community. And again, I have met the family members who lost someone on that day. They will never come back. They will never fully recover from that. But what they ask of me and all of us is that we do what we can with what we have, where we are right now, to make sure that no one else has to go through that. A universal background check would have stopped that massacre in Midland, Odessa. Now look, that won't stop every instance of gun violence. We know that. But it would do far more than what we are doing today to protect the people in our lives while still defending the Second Amendment. I guarantee you, at least bringing people around the table, we're going to be able to do better than what we have today. But as we come into our 15th week after this shooting in Uvalde, with nothing changed, nothing making it better for our kids and our teachers, we must think about what we can do after we win this election. What if we took it a step farther? In addition to protecting the lives of those in our schools against gun violence, what if we said, hey, it makes no sense that you have to tend bar on a Saturday night and also be a kindergarten teacher. Here in Val Verde County, on average, you are underpaid by $10,500 a year against just the national average. Not the highest paid teacher in America. Just to get to average, you're $10,000 down a year. No wonder you're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Here's my proposal. We pay you enough so that you just work that one job, focusing on that child in front of you, unlocking her lifelong love of learning. If you're a retired teacher, and you gave every working day of your life to this community, to these kids, to this state, to this country, and you have not seen a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord, 2004, and your costs have adjusted somewhat in your life, a lot since 2004, maybe 9% just this year. Your property taxes have gone up under Greg Abbott. Your electricity bills have gone up under Greg Abbott. When he shut down international trade at our border. Your grocery bills went up under Greg Abbott. Welcome to the Texas $5 avocado under Greg Abbott. We need to make sure that those retired teachers get a cost of living adjustment every single year. We need to have their backs. And you know who's going to help me do it? In addition to having Rochelle and Susan Hayes and these other great Democrats up and down the ballot, I am going to name a classroom teacher as our next TEA commissioner. So we have someone who understands what it's like to be in the classroom. That's how we're going to make it better. And I want to do all of this without not only not raising your property taxes, I want to do all of this and actually lower your property taxes. Okay, how is this guy going to do this? Let me explain. I mentioned earlier, we're the 9th largest economy on the planet. We do not lack for resources or wealth in the state of Texas. It's a $2 trillion gross domestic product. The biennial budget is set at $250 billion. We have the resources, we just need to prioritize it. Right now, we force your local school board to come up with the money to pay your teachers. And I understand the predicament that they're in. If they raise your salaries, they're going to have to raise your property taxes throughout this community, and they're kind of caught in a bind. Here's what we need to do. It used to be in Texas that the state spent 50% of the cost of public education. Today, it's 40%. I'm going to work with Republicans and Democrats alike to get us back up to 50%, to lower the amount that you have to pay locally, thereby reducing your local property tax bills. And in addition, además, we're going to do this. Right now, we are the least insured state in the United States of America. That means you may have diabetes, you don't qualify for Medicaid, you're not wealthy enough to afford private insurance, and so you don't fill that prescription for insulin. You die a younger death, you develop glaucoma, your care in the emergency room is that much more expensive, that much more painful for you. It's an immoral way for us to take care of or neglect one another, better said. We accept Medicaid expansion, which just means that we take back $10 billion of our federal income taxes that we paid up to DC every single year coming back to Texas. $10 billion that we use to stand up more rural clinics and hospitals. $10 billion that we use to hire more providers to come to underserved communities. $10 billion that we use to say, listen, you grew up in Uvalde County, you can't afford medical school, we'll strike a bargain with you. If you promise to come back and practice medicine here for 6 years, we'll pay your full ride to medical school. And we'll do that when we expand Medicaid. And you're no longer on the hook for uncompensated indigent care at your county hospital. Medicaid will pay for that. That lowers your property tax bill. Here's the kicker. We came up with this stuff. Lyndon Baines Johnson, the first president from the state of Texas in 1965, signs Medicaid into law. And the idea is a bipartisan one. Every single one of our border states, at least on the American side, have done the same thing. Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. 3 of those 4 under Republican governors have all taken the deal. It just makes too much common sense not to do this. And again, there are a critical number of Republicans who will support us in getting that done. A couple of other ideas that I want to lay on you right now. What if we invested in the infrastructure of this community? I talked to your new mayor about what it would mean to have a second commercial bridge, to have more commercial lanes coming through here, to follow up on the great work that previous Mayor Lozano did to make sure that we have a ports to plains program where we have true 4-lane highways at a minimum that connect Del Rio to every single part of the state. So what we make or what comes through here can get to markets so that we can drive safely on our roads, to invest in broadband internet, in the water resources that we need over the long term, in the infrastructure that has been neglected. Because Del Rio, like so many parts of this state and this border, are taken for granted by those in power. We win this election, we start investing in ourselves right here. And that means we attract more employers. higher paying, higher skill, higher value jobs right here in Del Rio. No more reasons for young people to go to Dallas or Houston or Chicago or New York or somewhere else. We want the rest of the world to beat a path to Del Rio. We want them to come right here. And no more minimum wage. It's $7.25 an hour. We raise that minimum until it is $15 at a minimum so that you work just that one job instead of 2 or 3 to make ends meet. So think about that. When our Democratic friends who say, what is this guy for? Our Republicans who say, I know Abbott's really extreme, but what is Beto doing on the other side? Our independents who say, look, I can't trust either party right now. I know that you went and saw Beto at Doc Holliday's. What did he have to talk about? Well, he said that he wanted to make sure that we prioritize the lives of our kids and that we made common sense changes to our gun laws to defend the Second Amendment. He also wanted to make sure that we invest in healthcare so everyone can see a doctor or fill a prescription. He talked about having the backs of our public school educators so that we have a superior system of public education in the state of Texas. And he talked about investing in the infrastructure of Valverde and Del Rio so that we attract more and higher paying jobs. World-class schools, better jobs, the ability to see a doctor. That's what this campaign is about. That is what is going to bring us together. And against this is the extremism of our current governor. Not only am I confident that we are going to win because we are running for the right reasons, to do the best by and for one another, but we're running against the worst governor in the United States of America today. Let me lay it down by the numbers. It's been 9 days since Greg Abbott's trigger law went into effect, which outlaws abortion beginning at conception with no exception for rape and no exception for incest. But for those of you concerned about rape, don't worry. Greg Abbott says he will eliminate rape in the state of Texas. I don't know if you heard this one. The problem with that, we looked at the numbers. More rapes have been committed in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. Since this guy took office 7.5 years ago, the ability to bring a perpetrator to justice has declined by half. There are more than 3,000 untested rape kits right now at DPS headquarters in Austin, Texas. So I'm afraid he's not going to eliminate rape. He's only going to make it harder for women to survive because we lead much of the country in a maternal mortality crisis that is exacerbated by this attack on women. So I tell you this, we win this election and we fight for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, her own health care. It has been 18 months since the genius in the governor's office could not keep the power on, could not keep the lights running, the heat going, the water flowing in the energy capital of the world. People froze to death in their homes. They froze to death going out to their trucks to charge their oxygen tanks. They burned up in their houses, lighting their furniture on fire because it was the only way to keep their kids warm, or so they thought. And to add insult to injury, he allowed his buddies, the gas traders, the pipeline CEOs, to take $11 billion from us over those 5 days when Texans were freezing to death in their homes, the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. And he charged you with the bill. You're paying at a minimum now $45 more per month, every single ratepayer across the state of Texas, though you have nothing to do, no culpability and no blame for what he and those responsible did. And the worst part about it all, he has yet to fix the grid. Well, here's what we do after we win. Number one, we weatherize every single part of the grid so that it runs even when the temperature drops. Number two, we connect our grid, ERCOT, with the national grid so we can pull down power when we need it, send it back up when we want to sell the surplus. And number three, we get those $11 billion that were stolen from us and we return it to the ratepayers of Texas to lower your utility bills going forward. What do you think about that? We should be able to do that. And 7.5 years, that's the other number I want to leave you with. 7.5 years to fix just any of the problems that he began with. I mentioned CPS. When he took office, federal judge Janice Jack said, "This program is one in which kids emerge more damaged, Mr. Governor, than when they went in." Just this January, she says, "That problem I first described to you back then has gone from bad to worse." I don't know if you see a trend here. This guy, Greg Abbott, is warned about things that are broken. It could be CPS, it could be grid, it could be school safety and school shootings, and does not a single thing. Looking after his cronies, the polls, Fox News, his largest contributors, everyone except for the people he is supposed to serve. You deserve a governor whose number one priority is you and your families, and will do everything in his power to make sure that he delivers for you. We are going to be able to do that when we win this election on the 9th of November 8th. You all with me?